Hi guys, so today I'm going to be making a golden ale which is trialling a couple of new ingredients in it, which are, first of all, Citra BBC Hop Pellets. So these are the enhanced hop pellets that you can now buy by Boston Brewing Company, I believe it is. And I'm also going to be using a US-05 style yeast made by Crossmyloof brewery. So it's part of their new series of yeasts. This one's called number 5, which is a pretty clear indication of the yeast that it's based on. So apparently it's basically their not repackaged but kind of clone yeast of US-05. So yeah, go through the recipe and stuff in the video, a little bit of brew day footage, and then see what I think of the finished beer at the end. Let's get on with it. Right, so recipe wise I've gone for my standard kind of golden ale grain bill. I like to mix the base malts for these sorts of beers, so I'll go with a roughly sort of half and half blend of lager malt or Pilsner malt and some sort of pale ale malt. In this case I've gone for 1.65 kilos of Golden Promise and 1.5 kilos of German Pilsner malt. Added to that I've got 200 grams of Caramalt, just to give the colour a little bit of a boost and add a touch of sweetness to it. And then we've got 150 grams of Wheat Malt there as well for a little bit of head retention, and yeah, basically mainly just for the head retention. So that's the grain bill, nice and simple. Water wise I'm using a RO water as the base and adding salts to it to basically bring it up to roughly 75 ppm of calcium, 150 ppm of sulfate and 50 ppm of chloride, with nominal amounts of sodium and magnesium to achieve those levels with the different minerals that I add. So that's kind of becoming my sort of go-to water profile, using the RO water for light kind of hoppy beers like golden ales or lighter American pale ales. So I find that works quite well. A little bit of acid in the mash as well, just to make sure that the pH is down a little bit. Then hopping wise, the main feature hop is going to be obviously the Citra BBC Hop Pellets. I'm saving all of those for late in the boil. I'm using basically just a whole 100 gram packet for this. It's a 19 litre batch, so should still be able to get a reasonable level of hoppiness in there with that amount. So for bittering I'm putting in 10 grams of Chinook for the full 60 minutes of the boil. That should give me about 18 IBUs. Then we're doing 30 grams of Citra at 5 minutes, another 30 grams for a 80-degree steep whirlpool for 20 minutes after flame out. Then we are doing 40 grams of Citra for the dry hop for 3 days. So yeah, a reasonably high level of hopping for a golden ale, but probably yeah, it's probably going to be bordering between golden ale style and an American pale ale, depending on how much we get from these hops. But again, that's part of the experiment to see how good the BBC hops are versus normal ones. I'm not doing any kind of control batch or actually A/B'ing it with a different brand of hops or whatever, but you know, anecdotally I'll be able to give you my opinion on what they taste like at the end. As I said, the yeast will be the Crossmyloof 5 yeast, which is basically US-05. See how that compares to my experience with normal or Saf Ale US-05 and whether it is essentially the same thing in terms of how it works for me. Mash temp was 66 and brewhouse efficiency 75%. We're looking at original gravity of 1042, just under 40 IBUs, so quite a high level of bitterness for the gravity, but I like you know, the golden ales to have a good kick of bitterness to them, like this one. If it ferments down to the target of 1.009, I should be looking at 4.5% or 4.4% to be precise. I reckon it will probably drop a point or two lower than that, so I think I'll probably be above 4.5%. Based on, again, my previous experience of US-05, if this yeast does in fact perform the same as that. yeah, so that's the recipe. I got a little bit of brew footage, so I'll put up a little bit of that now, but there's not a huge amount, so we'll probably be skipping straight to the tasting fairly quickly at the end. Okay. Okay, so there we have the finished product. That is about 10 days in the keg now. And yeah, I've been getting stuck into this quite a bit already, to be honest, because it's tasting pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with it overall. But before I get into trying the beer and giving you some tasting notes on it, I thought I'd just explain a little bit more about the two ingredients in this that I was using that were the kind of experimental part of the brew. So the BBC hops, first of all, Citra Bbc hops. The difference with those is basically the process for manufacturing them. The company that makes them is using a slightly different filtering method for the hop material, so that the particles in the hop pellets come out finer, and the theory is that that should allow them to be more efficient in terms of flavour extraction and aroma, and basically mean that you get more out of them per gram, so more bang for your buck, and should apparently make, I'm not sure how this works, but makes it less wasteful in terms of absorption as well. Something to do with the vegetal material being removed or something like that. So I guess that puts it somewhere between a standard T90 hop pellet and the cryo hops that you may have seen before. I think I did a video quite a while back using Citra cryo hops actually, and wasn't like massively overwhelmed by the difference between them and normal hops. These ones were from the malt miller, and I think that in terms of the price, well, compared to the ones that are on the malt miller's site themselves, they were not that much different in price to the normal Citra pellets, and they also still come in 100 gram packets. So whereas the cryo hops are usually sold sort of half packet size by them anyway, and works out about double the price. So yeah, that's the hops, and I'll put a link down the bottom to some information about those. There's a few other varieties being produced using that method as well. The yeast, as I said before, was basically a sort of USO5 clone yeast, I guess, or this company's version of USO5. So Crossmyloof yeast are a contract brewery in the UK, up in Scotland. Is it Edinburgh or Glasgow? One of those anyway. And the they basically, as a sideline, sell off hops and also quite a bit of yeast now as well, so all dried yeast. But their new range, which is the one that the 5 yeast came from, has a lot of different varieties, which, as far as I can tell, are kind of based on other brands of yeast that they've kind of redone. So there's quite a few different ones on there. There's the 4 and the 5, which are quite obviously, you know, they're versions of US05 and SO4. There is a Trent yeast on there, which Nottingham Trent, I assume that's Nottingham yeast. They have a haze yeast, which I would imagine, based on the fact that the only other dried hazy yeast that I know of is the Laumond East Coast. Is it East Coast IPA? Anyway, they're basically New England IPA dried yeast. There's a few others on there as well. There's a Pils yeast, which I don't know which one that might be, but maybe that's W3470. The other advantage of getting those yeasts from the guys at Crossmyloof is that it works out quite a bit cheaper as well. So if you just buy them one at a time, I think they cost about £2.20, £2.30 per packet or something, which is a bit cheaper than most of the companies online are selling. For example, US05 certainly, and some of the other yeasts that I mentioned would be quite a bit more expensive than that as well. But if you buy in bulk, you also get the price knocked down quite a bit as well. So if you buy 10 packets and you can mix up whichever varieties you want, that knocks the price down to about £1.60 a packet as well, which is really cheap for dried yeast, especially if it does the same sort of job as what those branded examples do. You can also get an extra 10% off if you put in the code GIVEME10 is it GIVEME10? I can't remember what the code is, something like that at checkout, but I'll check that and put that into the link at the bottom. So you can get it for basically under £15 for 10 packets of yeast, which is an absolute bargain. And based on my experience of the other yeast that they do, they've all been really reliable and also super, like, you know, healthy, and probably some of the fastest working yeast that I've ever used in dried form before, from their other range that they've got, which is yeah, again, includes a whole series of different yeasts. Anyway, I'm waffling on. So those are the 2 ingredients that were different in this. I've been talking for so long that the header's kind of dropped away from that. It's not completely gone. Excuse the grubby mitts, by the way. I've been redecorating the kitchen today. So, as I said, it's been in the keg for about 10 days, and in terms of sort of the yeast and how that's performed, that's probably the sort of appearance that I'd expect from US05, although this isn't US05 exactly, it's their version of it, but clarity-wise, that's the sort of appearance I'd expect after that amount of time. US05 typically, for me, takes a bit longer to drop clear in the keg. This wasn't massively dry hopped, so it should fall fairly clear eventually, but maybe a week or 2 longer. If it lasts that long, it will get a bit clearer. It certainly started to clear up, but yes, a little bit hazy still, not that that's much of a problem. Otherwise, the yeast did kind of perform pretty much exactly as I would expect from US05, so I'm pretty convinced that it is basically exactly the same yeast. As I said in the video before, I'd expect the final gravity to drop about a point or 2 lower. It did, so it came out at 4.7% rather than 4.5%. Similar sort of lag time and time to take to ferment out and everything. And as I said, the flocculation looks pretty much as I would expect for that yeast. So, and flavour and aroma wise, so far, it's very much assisting with the kind of hoppiness from this beer, which is what a lot of people like to use US05 for. So yeah, happy with the performance of the yeast in it, and I would definitely recommend those, especially if you want to save yourself a few quid on those sort of own brand yeasts, as it were. Onto the beer itself and the hops and their impact. So the aroma off of this is really like, you know, bags of Citra basically. It's right there up front, and again, for a beer that's not hugely dry hopped, I mean 40 grams in the dry hop is pretty modest by today's standards, certainly. It's really packing a punch, and you know, again, in terms of the aroma, just on that, I would say that it's probably edging more towards American Pale Ale or IPA territory rather than Golden Ale, as I was kind of intending the recipe to come out, which is a good sign. Flavour wise, good bit of bitterness there, but just tropical fruit is the dominant thing. Little bit of the kind of sweetness from the malt holding it up, but it's again distinctly Citra hops that are coming through. Now there's no control for this, so I can't, you know, compare it to a standard Citra batch, so this is all pretty much just my subjective opinion, but I would say based on the quantity of hops that have gone in here, this does taste a bit more yeah, just more prominent fruitiness, and for the quantity of hops that have gone in, it's really kind of packing quite a punch. And again, definitely venturing more into American Pale Ale territory flavour-wise for me. What I would say, based on my previous experience of Citra hops, is that this one maybe expresses a little bit more of the of particular fruit flavours in it than other Citra beers that I've brewed. So I get a lot of the sort of papaya and what other, you know, slightly more soft kind of tropical fruit flavours coming through on this. Bit of mango, maybe even a touch of sort of lychee and passion fruit there as well. Really good stuff, to be honest. So as I said, price wise on the Malt Miller site anyway, it's pretty much comparable to the price they're selling standard Citra hops. So bearing that in mind, if you're buying from Malt Miller, I would say it's definitely worth giving them a go, particularly if Citra is going to be the sort of feature hop in a beer that you're making. I think this would definitely be a worthwhile experiment to try these out. I think you can probably pick up Citra a bit more cheaply, a lot more cheaply if you're buying from maybe some other suppliers, or you're buying in bulk, especially, in which case you might want to think a little bit more about whether, you know, obviously that difference in price is worthwhile. But again, for a 100 gram pack, I'd definitely use them again. So it's a thumbs up from me for the BBC Citra hops. And yeah, this keg is going to get an absolute hammering, to be honest, because this is drinking really well already. And the wife's been getting stuck into it as well, so when that happens, it never really gets beyond about 2 or 3 weeks, if I'm lucky. So yeah, doubt it will make it to Christmas, which was the original idea for brewing this beer, that I'd have a nice pale ale for Christmas, but we'll see. Yeah, that's it really. So cheers guys, I'll put the recipe and stuff in the description as well if anyone wants to have a go at this. So thank you very much, bye bye.
I'm the dude, so that's what you call me, you know, that or his dudeness, or duder, or you know, El Duderino.